All right, so my goal is to stop at 12:15. I think, is that right? Does that sound right? 12:15? Okay. All right, let's talk about culture and society. So there's a professor named Murdu Kashyap, whom I really like. I met her like 30 years ago in Chicago, and she and I have worked closely off and on throughout the years. So she still lives in Chicago, and she teaches for Iowa State online. And she's got about 30 years of experience at Motorola and Allstate and corporations. So she brings those stories to the courses. So she talks about these levels of socio-cultural research. So most of the time when we're thinking about UX, we're down here. We're like, oh, I have a user who's confused. We need to have better affordances. You know, how do I open this water bottle quickly? Okay, I've got 2 steps. I got to flip this down. I got to punch this. So maybe I'm frustrated by that, depending on what I'm doing. Or maybe I'm happy because it's more secure. And that's down in here. This is about people and affordances and interactions. But this next level is about community. So it seems like a lot of people in India use WhatsApp, right? Well, it wouldn't be so effective if everybody didn't use WhatsApp. So like once everybody's in, then it's like, oh, we've got a whole way to communicate now. This is great. So you can build a community around WhatsApp, and then it enables you to communicate with groups and with vendors. You can ask customer support. You can do all sorts of things. So this is groups of humans that have common goals, basically. And then up in culture is even higher level. So some examples of culture might be things like, in the US, there's a typical like individualistic culture. Like people are out for themselves often, like I want to get rich and do for myself. You find other people are not like that, but I think that's a little more the stereotype is I'm out for myself. Whereas maybe that's not true in other countries, right? In Sweden and Norway and the Scandinavian countries, they're more like communal. And they're more like, oh yeah, you should have time off when you have a child. You should have a year off because that's going to support you and our whole community will support you. So you end up with these sort of higher rules. And what's nice when you're designing products is you can check in on each of these layers and say, okay, my new product, how is it going to affect this level, this level, this level? So it might be that we've got some affordances down here. This is about relationships and social things. So WhatsApp has made decisions about, can you see when people have read messages, or do we give you the option to turn that off? Do you give it the option to download everything or not? And those are all things that affect socializing and relationships. And there are also things like up in the culture level, there are things like, oh, let's have laws that mean that people with certain religions have a harder time living here, or people if they're do people say LGBTQ here? I don't know, queer, something. Okay, so there's different laws about that in different countries, right? And so that's going to affect your technology as well. So this is one of the articles, the Peters article. And what's interesting is you get people with tech-centric views and human-centric views. So let's look. The tech-centric view is going to be somebody like Elon Musk, like humans are scum, the technology rules, we need to take over the technology. And that's a little bit of a stereotype, but it's like, okay, yeah, the AI is going to take over, it's going to be great. And then the human-centric view is a little more like, okay, humans are always superior to AI because they have social aspects, they have feelings, they can understand the impact of nature. Director Rao yesterday was talking about, it's Rao, right? I got his name right? Yeah, he was talking about the impact of nature, right, and the complexity. So this is the human-centric view. So if your users are one or the other, that might affect you. If I'm tech-centric, I might roll out a new product and say, well, everybody's going to buy this because it's awesome. It's the newest tech. And half the people are like, I don't want the newest tech. It's going to break. It's sort of scary. This AI is frightening me. So you need to understand where you're coming from. Then there's this other view, collective intelligence. It's a little bit like we're going to work together, the humans and the AI. Right? We can work together if we figure out how to do it right. So let's look at some examples. There's this term superintelligence. Sorry.
I just had a question because when you started talking about human-centered design, there was this parallel going on about planet-centered design.
Oh, yeah.
So, do we have something similar we need to work together with the nature as well on the planet.
Yeah, that would be at the top level for sure. The planet-centered, exactly. And I've heard about sustainable design, right? So whenever you type in ChatGPT, it's using water. So people have talked about, a bottle of water this big is about 50 prompts, something like that. So is that okay? No.
It's extremely energy extensive.
Right.
So I think it's much more than, like, just for one prompt, it's much more than a bottle of water.
I mean, it could differ depending on the prompt or something. Somebody was telling me like bottle, I think they were telling like the bottle you've got, the plastic one, was about 50 prompts, but it could differ, right? And it could differ as the machine learning system gets smarter. But it's definitely a consideration. Yeah. Superintelligence is this idea that the computers are going to be smarter than humankind eventually. And the human-centric view sees the threat as, humankind's social nature is going to be overlooked. We're all going to be on our phones alone in our houses and not talk to each other. And where's the social, aspect? And then there's this collective view. What's interesting on once you get up to this top level, it's easy to create things that are a large, complex system, and you're not really sure how to take it apart. So when did I mention I lived in Namibia for a year? I forget if I told you this. Okay, so my family went in 2022 for the year of 2022 and lived in Namibia, which is down by southern Africa. And I had a former student there who got her PhD at Iowa State, and then she was back in Namibia, and she's like, hey, you should come visit. So we went on a Fulbright scholarship. Do y'all know about Fulbright? So it's a U.S. Scholarship that I haven't looked at so what I would want to do is look at the U.S. Embassy in India under educational opportunities and see if there's Fulbright, and they might say something like, we'll send you to the U.S. for a master's degree.
I think in India it's Nehru Fulbright.
It's the which?
Nehru Fulbright. So Nehru is like, he's Indian and he was Prime Minister. Yeah, so with Fulbright, they have kind of collaborated for Indians.
Okay. But there's an opportunity to come to the U.S. maybe with Fulbright. Well, I'll look at that later. So my wife and I got a Fulbright. You can also be a professor and get a Fulbright. She's a professor too. And so she got the Fulbright to go to Namibia. So we were both visiting professors there. And we learned a lot from that experience. Because I feel like here's an example. There was a kid so we took my two sons who are teenagers, and they're getting to know friends at school. And there was one kid who had just started computer science at the University of Namibia. And I said, oh, hey, Vander, what are you learning in computer science? He said, we're learning Java. I'm like, oh, great. I was like, are they going to teach you Python at all? And he's like, what's Python? So it was astonishing to me that a 19-year-old in computer science could not have heard of Python. And I'm like, why is this? How did this come to pass? And I think what it is because there's one telecom company pretty much in Namibia that provides all the internet and the cell phones. And they are tight in bed with the government. So they give all the taxes to the government, which means their internet rate is the most expensive in all of Africa. So the internet is too expensive to browse at home. So the kids at Namibia will browse at work or at school, but nobody's really like watching YouTube at home because it's too expensive. And so this is an interesting little effect where the comm company is just like, oh, we're going to charge this money, not realizing that they have this ripple effect on the whole culture of the country of like not letting people learn vicariously. And so when Joanne, my spouse, and I were living in Namibia, we're like, wow, there's a couple different big problems here. And it's like a ball of yarn that's all like pushed together, and you're like, where do I pull first? If I want to undo this knot. And it's really unclear. So when you get to that top level, that's when there's a lot of things interacting, and it's not really clear how to solve it, right? I don't know. So I'm not saying it's hopeless, right? But you got to try sometimes. But that's the systemic problems. So let's look a little at the micro. We've got some humans, and we've got some AI, and we've got some activity that they're going to maybe do together, right? And if we're collective, we're ideally going to collaborate nicely and do this activity together. And so there's this phrase about AI, that AI is good for doing dull, dangerous, dirty, and difficult things, the 4 Ds. And so, AI could do dull things like count the number of people in this, age bracket or something, or dangerous things like go rescue this thing that's near dangerous chemicals, dirty, or just difficult stuff. So, but humans are up there, and they have needs like, hey, I'm a human. I have limited memory. I'm going to forget things. I get tired. Whereas the machines never tire. I have biases. Maybe I am biased to be, I think, I'm human-centric, something like that. And social pressures, too. Your friends can be like, hey, why aren't you using ChatGPT? Everybody's using ChatGPT. And so the tech-centric view, so I'm going to show you the tech-centric view and then the human-centric view. Tech-centric is like, oh, yeah, AI can do anything. And if there's AI brings up new problems, we can solve it with AI. We're good. And it's going to get just better and better for the humans. And we've only hit a fraction of the potential. We are just at the very birth point of AI. Look, it's going to grow so much. Okay, here's the human-centric view. And now this is still tech-centric. Have people heard of general intelligence, artificial general intelligence, AGI? This is the idea that like the AI now is, usually somewhat narrow. When it started, it was pretty narrow. Like I'm going to diagnose cancer in X-rays, and then we get narrow superintelligence like ChatGPT, where it has scanned the entire internet, and now it can talk about a lot of things. But it's not general intelligence because I can't say things to it as well about human relationships. I can't really trust it. It's not like another friend. But the tech view is like humans are biased. We need to get the human biases gone. So the human-centric view is more like this. I'm going to try to automate labor. So I don't want to pull weeds out of my garden. I'm going to have the robot do that. That'd be great. I'm going to delegate hard decisions. Which car should I buy? If the AI knows me, it may be just like, here's the car for you. Like that would be nice. That's a big cognitive load. Tasks versus thinking tasks versus feeling tasks, right? So I might have just plain old tasks like take out the garbage, put it somewhere. I might have feeling tasks like my mom is getting older and is starting to slow down. Do I need to talk with her about this and maybe talk about moving her to a care facility? Like this is a hard thing. A lot of people my age are dealing with this with their parents aging. And it's a lot of cognitive load in your brain, right? And it's all emotionally wrapped up. Yeah. So it's unclear that AI could do that for you, right? Or it might tell you, like, here's what everybody else is doing. And ideally, we have a cooperative team, so I understand what the AI is doing, right? So here's an example. If my stepdad has passed away now, but when he was alive, he had a stroke near the end of his life. And he could understand you fine, but he couldn't produce the words that he always wanted to produce. So you could ask him how the day was, and you had to be very patient to have him get the words out. But when I would introduce people to him, we're walking around with a mental model or schema on how to interact with older people. Here's what you do. You are gracious, you talk slowly, here are the things you do. And we all have mental models for how to interact with a 5-year-old too, or a dog or whatever. So, but when I introduce you to my dad, and I say, my dad, had this stroke, and he can understand you fine, but he can't always find his words. You easily adjust. You can adjust your mental model and be like, oh, cool, I'll just be more patient. That's fine, and you can interact with my dad. But now let's think about like Alexa or Siri, right? Alexa let's say it has 5,000 things it can do. And then you're like, okay, I'm getting used to Alexa. I know I can ask it to play my music or do this or do that, and I can ask it these things. And then it gets a software upgrade. And now it can do 5,000 new things. It's like, how are you going to deal with that? And nobody's figured out in the companies on how to deal with that. Like, I need to convey to you, this person has new skills, right? Yeah. And it's easy to increase those pretty dramatically. Do people do karate and taekwondo here and that sort of thing? And you have these colorful belts, right? And so if people are in that field, they're like, oh, he's got a green belt. That means he can do this and this and this. So it's almost like for the AI agents, we need these belts or badges or something. Yeah. Nobody's really figured that out. You can be the person who labels that and figures that out, right? And publishes and be like, yeah. So in this human-centric view, and we're in the meso level, we're talking about communities, there's a lot of trust in here. And the systems work most, say the authors of this article, Systems work best when individuals can act in self-interest and in the interest of others, both. Like it gives you the chance to do both. You can decide if you believe that or not. But so this human-centric view would say, well, hey, AI can only do part of the human. So there's a lot of real-world problems, like how to make water cleaner or how to make their air cleaner. Like AI can't solve that. Sorry. Somebody's like, yes, it can? No, I don't know. So we'll see. Maybe we can in the future. And the humans are going to be like, yeah, the real world's too complex for the AI. And if you got new problems with AI, typically AI can't solve its own problems, and it just causes problems. So you get people worried about this, right? And let's think about HR functions. So do they call it HR here, like human resources? Yeah. So I get hired. Maybe somebody's harassing me at work. I'm really feeling bad. I'm not comfortable at work, coming into work. I'm scared to come into work, and I need to talk to somebody. So, how do I do that? Like, where is that in the human versus AI? That's a sort of a feeling task. Do I want that? If I'm the HR human who's in charge of HR, I probably don't want to delegate that to AI. Maybe there's an AI bot that I can chat at first. I'm like, hey, somebody's harassing me. What do I do? And maybe it has suggestions. But when it comes to decision making about do we fire this person or do we start an inquiry, then I probably want a human involved.
Thinking about this HR question.
Yeah.
For the AI to respond to it, somebody would have been feeding this kind of information or solutions over the years, and then it builds up its database of replies.
Yeah, that's right.
Who decides it's correct? That's going inside.
Yeah.
Who edits or?
Yeah, some author of the content gets to decide here's the right behavior with HR, right? And then they're going to upload that to the AI. But it's an interesting question about like who gets the power to author the AI's responses. Have you ever done a poster session where you like have a research poster and people are walking by and you're like, here's my research, So one of the students I work with made an AI avatar to talk about their poster, to give practice for poster sessions for grad students who've never been to a poster session. So she took two of her peers and copy pasted the poster content into the AI bot. Of like now, and it comes like ChatGPT, and it knows all general stuff. And then there's a text box where you could add, like, I think here's this other stuff here's this poster content. And so we did that for this student named Yvonne and for a student named Ralph, and then the two different avatars could talk eloquently about their posters. So it's not hard to add the knowledge, right? It's sort of startling how good they were. Yeah. So generally, this is try to consider systems at the micro, meso, and macro level. Here's at the very high level about culture. And some people define culture, it's hard to define culture, but you can define it as values plus context plus behaviors. So the behaviors like, what are people doing? Let's think of a cultural example. Since visiting India, I had to learn how to use the sprayer next to the toilet. So now I'm really excited about the sprayer. I'm like, oh, we should have this in the US. This is great. But I had to learn that, right? So there's a behavior about how you use the toilet. And then there's a context about, okay, here's the bathrooms around the place. There's some are public, some are private, some are different circumstances. And there's a value aspect, and you might have a value in like, oh, you need to be clean in the bathroom. How are we going to do that? And so that comes together to a culture of like people building sprayers everywhere. This is the article again, and you may not agree, but the authors of the article talk about what is intelligence. And it's the intelligence of a system is about how the entities are working together. So a more intelligent system has more opportunities for the entities to work together, as opposed to, oh, it can mow your yard or it can pick your weeds, but it can't buy a car for you. And there's this idea that, alone you're going to be less powerful than if you can actually collaborate and be a cooperative system. So my pitch here is sort of think system-wide. And here's a little bit more on the systems. Have people heard of design thinking? Do people talk about design thinking here? Okay. And there's systems, and then there's values underlying the design thinking. So this is a couple slides from the Luma Institute, and I am not getting paid by the Luma Institute. I am not trying to say they're the best one. It's just they have some nice pictures. And this, you may say, oh, this is stuff we've all seen, so I'll be quick. But if I'm going to design for users, I need to get to know my users, right? And I'm going to watch them, I'm going to understand them, try to make them. And all these bullets are techniques, like tools in your toolbox that you can use. How do I watch users? Well, I'm going to interview people, or I'm just going to observe. They all got fly on the wall observing. There's a fly just sitting there. I'm going to shadow them and walk a mile with them. You know, you can ask people to be like, okay, what feature would you buy from the system if you had some money? What extra feature would you like? Can you do some journaling for me about how you use the system? So these are all techniques, and then the understanding as well, and then the making. And you can go on the Luna website and read more about them.
There's something very similar. I think you would probably know already. It's called ideal method cards.
Oh, the method cards, yes. So you were saying the IDO method cards? Yeah. Yeah, there's the IDO method cards, and then there's a professor at Iowa State who made her own deck of cards, and she's like, mine are better than IDOs, but like hers are not selling like IDOs, so we don't know. But yeah, there's the.
For this one, you prefer Luma over ideal?
I think this is a little more systematic than like randomly drawing the cards, but the cards are good if you're feeling stuck and you're like, I don't know how to approach this solution. And it's like you draw a card and it's like, oh, maybe think of it from the point of view of a child. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe. Right, that's right. So I'm not saying they're bad, but. So the UX is typically over here in the looking. Most of the UX techniques are over on the looking side. There's a little bit less on the understanding and making, but in the UX world, have you all heard of Agile? Is that a thing people talk about? Agile programming? So not everybody knows this, but back in the day in programming, it used to be like somebody writes the specs, like this software must allow an airplane to take off successfully, and it's got to have these features. And then you write all the features out, and the next people start programming it, and the next people start debugging it, and it's called waterfall. And it's like handoff. And it's extremely expensive, and when things go wrong, you're like, oh, pass it back up the waterfall. And it takes a long time, and it's frustrating. Now, waterfall is still sometimes needed for like life and death systems, like a hospital monitor, or maybe a military something that's going to drop a bomb on somebody, something like. When you're thinking about things where life and death is in the line, then maybe the waterfall is okay. But most software is developed now using Agile, which is this iterative cycle. And typically there's 2-week sprints, and it's a cycle. So it's like, hey, developers, let's get together in a room, and here's a feature I need, and here's another feature I need, and you get this feature to build, and you get this feature to build, and come back in 2 weeks, we're going to see how you're doing. And you come back, and you're like, okay, how's this working? And they say, okay. This is working pretty well on this one, but this one needs fixing. Okay, next sprint, you're going to do this. So it's iterative every 2 weeks, all the time. And a lot of companies will use this. And the UX crowd has been feeling often like, well, that leaves us out. What are we doing? How are we doing UX when people are all vigorously doing this Agile thing? So somebody invented something called lean UX. Lean is the term from like Toyota and Japan and being all efficient in your company, So lean UX is like dovetailing with Agile. So you can do Agile and you can do UX as part of the sprint. So if you like this idea, you can read about lean UX. But yeah. Okay.
Start with anything that you would recommend to understand Agile practically.
Sorry, say again?
Anything that you would recommend to read to understand Agile in a practical.
I think there's a lot on the web about Agile, so you could just Google Agile programming, maybe Wikipedia, that sort of thing. Or maybe medium.com. Do people here read medium.com? It's sort of a website that has a lot of information about UX. So there's going to be some Agile people there. And Agile's a little bit like a religion. Like some companies are like, we do Agile, and we call them sprints, and they're always 2-week sprints, and they're very strict. And other companies are like, we have the spirit of Agile, we are iterative. But we're not going to hold you to this line, because that's just going to make everything painful. so that people vary on how strict they are in their interpretations.
So it's kind of traditional old way of doing solving the problem. Like modern problem requires modern solutions. So we have shifted from Azure to the UX designs.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen the double diamond? So this is a British thing, and time is moving left to right. And so if I say that's a British thing, does that make you go like, ew, it's a British thing because we don't like Britain? I don't know. I don't know how that works here. Okay. But time is going left to right. And usually you've got to figure out what you're designing. So I have a problem that let's see, birth control pills don't work well for every woman. That's maybe a problem I want to solve. There's different recipes for these different pills, different hormonal levels. And so I decide, what am I going to do? I'm going to do discovery. I'm going to interview a bunch of women who are using these pills. I'm going to define the problem. I'm going to narrow it down and say, okay, here's where the most problem is. Here's where we're going to target. And once I get there, I've defined the problem. So the diamond is there because I'm getting big, lots of brainstorming, lots of information, then I narrow down to one little problem. And I decide really what I want is a better pill for women in this age range or something like that. And then I have to go and design it. So there's different solutions. Maybe I have different recipes. Maybe I have different factories. I have different things. Instead of a pill, it's going to be things you mix together, something like this. So I have different solutions. I go big and I brainstorm and then I narrow down to a product I'm going to really pump out. So this is useful often when you're with a team and you're like, what happens sometimes on design teams is you'll be all over the place. And so then you can tell your friends, hey, remember the double diamond? Where are we? Like, where are we on the double diamond? And they're like, oh, well, we're brainstorming all in here. And you're like, I don't think we really got here yet. Can we go back? Right? And so you can sort of talk through, where you are. Okay, so I'm going to skip over these because you can read about them on the Luna website. And Luna has this idea of recipes. So you might take, every one of these methods has like little tiles to them. And then you can combine tiles. You can say, well, let's combine these 3 tiles, or let's combine those 4 tiles. And it's that little recipes. Okay. So the last thing is about systems thinking. We've talked a little about this. Yeah.
How would we elicit latent needs? Like when we interview, we would know this thing, but how do we get the latent needs out?
Oh, the latent needs? So ideally, you're talking to them enough that you start to realize they have needs that they haven't told you explicitly. Like maybe they're telling you about their needs. Oh, I'm always stressed at the end of the day. I wish I had a tool to help me do this before I left. And then what you realize is like, oh, they have no sense of closure of their task. There's no clear finish line for their task. So they didn't tell you that, but you realize that because you spend enough time with them. Does that make sense? It doesn't always work, right? But you do your best to talk to them and start to understand their situation. That does tie into the systems thinking, though, which we're doing. Because if you can somebody will come and say, oh, I'm a cab driver. I drive cabs in Delhi. Here's my life. I do an average of 20 trips every couple hours. And I'm frustrated when I get trips like this and not like this, or I'm frustrated by these things. And you can think about it not just in terms of that user, but as a system. So the system is that there are people who need to move from place to place. There's demand and supply. There are different cost factors. There's people who have trust issues about, do I trust this taxi versus this taxi? So there are all these bigger high-level factors. And you can try to think about it as this sort of systemic thing. And I have this note in here about build a muscle for zooming in and out. So if I spend all day, lifting my water bottle like this, I'm going to build these triceps, right? And I want to build a muscle similarly for zooming in and out of systems. And what I mean by that is like, okay, at the low level of the system, I'm like, oh, this cab driver's needs. I understand the cab driver, I understand his needs. But in the high level, I say, what is good for Delhi? Like, too many cab drivers is more traffic, more exhaust. Maybe I'm thinking at a high level. So like, I'm need to check as I do my design, I need to zoom in and out, right? So I'll be like, okay, I'm doing this design. This is really gonna help my user. What's it gonna do to Delhi as a city experience? You know, what's it gonna do to the ability of the driver to eat during the day? You know, and so it's sort of going back and forth. And that's the zooming in and out. So it's helpful to practice that. Here's some examples of systems. This is for, you know, I've got things I've got manufacturing I need to do. Like I've got stuff I need to dig out of the ground, like metals and things. And then I've got systems to serve, like farmers and, you know, we need to make food. So there's this is attempting to put together the conflict between manufacturing and sustainable world, right, in like one diagram, because they tend to be at conflict with each other. And so I've got my user here. I wanted these things built for me. I wanted more water bottles that I can be safe about. But I'm a little sad that I have to throw away a water bottle after I use it. Is there some way I can be safe and reuse it? And so, you know, you get into the regeneration. So it's just trying to map in that. And it's not going to solve your problems for you drawing a system like this, but if you draw a system like this, it can help you with like a mental checklist. Like, okay, I'm designing my product. I got a new water bottle. How does it fit into this? Well, it's really easy to manufacture. Plastic's easy to manufacture. And it's not a huge impact on the environment, but it's some, you know, so you have this sort of checklist. Okay, last thing we're going to do is about values. So Robert Cosma has this book, and I put it in your online folder, and it's a PDF of an entire book. It's like an entire 300-page book, which he made public. It's not like I'm bootlegging it, right? And it's a wonderful book. It's about like making the world a better place. And so he talks about the moral aspects of design. And has anybody ever done a values audit? This is the thing. There's different ways you can do this. You can bring up an iPhone app, or a phone app, and it'll say things like, do you think it's more important to be honest or to be genuine? Or something like that. Or do you think it's more important to look good or to save your money? And it gives you all these double choices, these binary choices. And you're like, pick a bunch of choices, it takes 10 or 15 minutes, and then it goes up and it says, okay, these are your top 5 values. And sometimes people find that useful. They're like, oh, I didn't realize I valued this thing so much. I know when Joanne, my spouse, and I were doing marriage counseling, right? We were going to go to this, we were Christians, so we go to this pastor, and he's like checking us out to make sure we don't screw up our marriage. And so one of the things he did was gave us a questionnaire. And he said, so Stephen, I want you to fill out the entire questionnaire, and then I want you to fill it out how you think Joanne's going to fill it out. And then she does the same thing. She fills it out for me and for her. And then we swap. And if I don't have the guesses for Joanne right, then we got to talk about that, right? That's serious points to talk about. And one of the most interesting questions was the one I like, if your clothes washing machine breaks, do you buy the cheap one to replace it, or do you buy the really high quality one that won't break and it'll last a long time? And because in marriages, you know, the things that screw you up are either money, in-laws, or sex. And so those are all the topics you got to cover. And the money thing can really mess you up. So that was an interesting question, right? And so you get up with these value sort things. You can go through and you can start getting flags about like, wow, I seem to really value saving money. So I hope my partner does too. Or if they don't, we got to talk about that.
A lot of places in employment they're making such questionnaires mandatory.
Oh, really? For the employers now?
Yeah.
They want to know your values before they hire you?
I think it's got to do with IQ versus EQ.
Oh, yeah, the EQ. That's another popular topic. Yeah, that's right.
So now they have a separate place where you are supposed to fill it up before you have your interview. And that is how they judge you.
Wow. And I guess you could go and read the website and see what they value. You know, their website's always going to have things like, we're an investment bank. We value returns and integrity. And, you know, I don't know. I'm torn on this because sometimes it's just like fuzzy high-level words. And it feels a little like trying to push, a rope or something. It's hard to push a rope. But I think there is something underlying there. Like, I think there is something, you do this and it might surprise you. It might be worth knowing, like, here are the things I value. So there's Batya Friedman has a nice TED talk about value-sensitive design. And here's again Robert Kozma about what is good. So, and you can again debate. Kozma says, here's what good is. It's not just being good, but doing good. So he doesn't really care what's in your head. He cares what you did. And religions differ on that, right? When you look at religions, they're like, is it your inner life or is it like what you actually did? So he's more like, what's your impact on the world? And then here are his 7 principles, moral foundations for good design. So I just don't want you to think, I'm saying this not necessarily like, you have to believe this, and this is the truth. I'm more like saying, there are people out there thinking about the morality of design and the moral impact of design. So if you think that design is neutral of value, I don't think it is. I don't think it's neutral. Some people say, oh, technology is neutral. You can use guns to save people or shoot people. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's going to be moral values in there. Like the US has way too many guns. But, yeah. Okay. So that is it for today. Well, not it, that's it for the morning. And then we come back, and this afternoon, I'm really excited to hear about your presentations. And we get tutorial 2. Where's tutorial 2? Tutorial 2, where we're going to write some speculative fiction. You're like, I'm a designer or an engineer. I don't write things. But we're going to do a little bit of writing. Yeah. Okay. So see you after lunch.
So fiction according speculative, what would be?
I'll define it. You can Google it too. You can Google it. It's a thing. You can Google it, or we'll just.